Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a fantastic day. My name is Kmart, and I want to talk about some basketball. And today, we're going to be doing something maybe a little, what's the word? I guess maybe generic is the term I want to use here. News in terms of the NBA sort of slowing down a little bit, right? Free agency's kind of settled down, and we're just waiting for things like training camp, preseason, things of that nature. So, no hard hitting stories coming out here recently, unless you're interested in um, more non news about Harden and Lillard trades that aren't happening. So, I thought what we could do here is we could do some predictions for each of the divisions in the league, sort of run through each of the six divisions and talk about who the sort of top teams I think are going to be. Um, and we're going to do the top two of each division here in this video because if we did just division winners, the list would look almost exclusively like last year's list. But we're going to do top two instead, so we'll do a winner for each division and the team I think is most likely to be the runner up. And I'll talk just a little bit about why. Not super in depth because we got to get through all six divisions here in one go, but we will we'll talk about it. Who I think is going to be first and second in each division. So enough rambling. Let's get into it. We're going to start in the Eastern Conference here with the excuse me, with the Atlantic Division. The division, in case you've forgotten, somehow includes the Celtics, the Nets, the 76ers, the Knicks, and the Raptors. So, in terms of a division winner for this one, it's pretty simple. It's got to be Boston, the Boston Celtics here. Yes, there are concerns about how well their defense holds up, with guys like Marcus Smart and Grant Williams having been sent away, but the Celtics were not the third best defensive team in the league last season just because of those two guys. Yes, they were important to the defensive schemes overall, but the team as a whole was one of the best defensive squads in the league, and I can see a little bit of regression happening with some of those guys missing, but not a massive sort of downward slide for them in terms of their defensive ratings. Meanwhile, on the offensive end of the floor, you've still got Tatum and Brown leading the way, two of the more talented sort of offensive guys in the league. And all of this is before you factor in the potential benefits of having Porzingis on the roster and hopefully healthy and active across an entire season. Porzingis could honestly sort of bolster both sides of the ball here for the Celtics and remove a lot of those concerns. So, was the Porzingis trade a potential risk? Yes, it was, but it's still hard to believe that anyone's going to be able to get a better record than Boston in this division at the end of the season. But that does bring us to our runner-up here, and for the runner-up in the Atlantic, I am going to go with the Knicks. If the Philadelphia 76ers somehow solve all of their sort of Harden and Embiid related issues in the short term, like if they get that sorted out somehow in the next couple of months, then sure, this changes. Then you just plug the 76ers right back into that spot. Maybe they even compete with the Celtics. But that doesn't look to be happening anytime soon, so for now I'm going to go with the Knicks. New York was third in the league in offensive rating last season. They seemed relatively comfortable running the offense through a sort of big three of Julius Randle, Jalen Brunson, and RJ Barrett. We got to see extended amounts of time for the latter two there, Brunson and Barrett, with their performances in the World Cup. They were pretty impressive, so they're remaining sort of active and improving over the offseason. Didn't get to see Randle, but I, assume he is working on his game as well over the summer. So that trio is still going to be the core of the team. That hasn't really changed. The concern for the Knicks was that last season there were times where they went too hard on that trio. Too many possessions where Randle or Brunson or Barrett were just sort of given the ball, and it was it was sort of a little bit of a black hole, right? The rest of the team couldn't do anything. If one of the stars did not produce a basket on their own, then the Knicks just didn't score on that possession. But they've got some pieces in place now that maybe help them with that. Josh Hart is going to be here for a full season instead of just the little less than half that he played in the last campaign after being traded. They went out and got Dante DiVincenzo, so are either of those guys going to be a fourth member of a core here for the Knicks? Maybe not, but they are semi-reliable pieces around that core trio that's going to hopefully make it so that the Knicks aren't entirely dependent on one of their stars to make anything happen on the offensive end. So the Knicks do look a little bit better on that front. They still need to massively increase their defensive effort, though. That part's still up in the air, and I think that's where we still see an opening for maybe someone like Philly or Brooklyn to slip past them, but at least on the offensive end, the Knicks seem to have something already built up that they can rely upon. It's just a matter of improving further. So that is it for the Atlantic. Boston in first, New York in second. We'll move on to the Central Division. The Central consisting of the Bulls, the Bucks, the Cavs, the Pacers, and the Pistons. So, in terms of the division winner for the Central Division, it's still got to be Milwaukee. This division ran through Milwaukee last season, and the Bucks look largely the same coming into this campaign. Yes, all of their core players are a little bit older, right? Giannis, Middleton, Brook Lopez, Drew Holiday. They're not old, but they're not young either, I suppose would be the way that you would phrase that politely, right? But so long as that core remains healthy, the Bucks are still going to be a problem for every other team in that division. They were top 5 in defensive rating last season, which, with a lot of the same guys coming back, both in terms of the core and the bench, I don't really see that changing too much. They should be able to maintain a top 5 position. The hope, though, would be that the stars do stay healthy, right? You don't have each of your core pieces missing 10 to 20 games. And maybe even more importantly, you have everyone sort of healthy and fresh and ready to go for the playoffs. So that's where things sort of fell apart. That's where the wheels came off for Milwaukee. In the playoffs, people got hurt and it all kind of fell apart. But in the regular season, the Bucks just completely controlled this division, and I think honestly that's probably just going to happen again unless something horrible happens with the health of their stars. So if Milwaukee maintains the number 1 spot, who is the runner-up in the Central Division? It's pretty much got to be Cleveland at this point. This is the exact same duo that finished first and second last season. It was Bucks in first, Cavs in second, and there's a pretty good reason for that, right? The Cavs joined some of the top company in the Eastern Conference. They turned themselves into a top 4, top 5 team in the East, and they bring back mostly the same roster again for the 23-24 campaign, right? You still got your sort of core duos at both the big man position and in terms of the guards, right? You've got Jared Allen and Evan Mobley down low. You've got Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland alternatively sort of running the point, right? They kind of switch off. Garland handles it more often, but that core is still there. And there have been some rumblings from, well, not even from Donovan Mitchell's camp, but around Donovan Mitchell that maybe he doesn't want to be in Cleveland, yada, yada, yada. But for this season, at least, he is. And so long as he's sort of focused and locked in, this team is going to be scary. They were first in defensive rating last season, literally the best team in the league by defensive rating, while still being top 10 in offensive rating. So the expectations are going to be incredibly high for Cleveland right at the start. They went out and added some young guys in the draft that they're excited about. They went out and got Max Strus for a little bit of an maybe outside shooting specialist, because three-point shooting was a little bit of a touchy subject for Cleveland last season. So they improved where they needed to. They maintained what was strong. And I think on top of all of that, on top of everything you talk about for Cleveland in terms of what they bring back, you also need to talk about the rest of the division. no part of this trio of Chicago, Detroit, and Indiana seem ready to push that much further, right? I believe at least two of those teams will do better, right? The Pacers in particular, I think, are finally ready to try and do something, but enough to catch up, enough to turn themselves into a, 44, 45 plus win team, I don't really see that happening. Not in this short of a time span. So Cleveland, much like Milwaukee, just kind of runs it back with a very similar lineup, and barring any health issues, I think they should expect similar results. So Milwaukee in first, Cleveland in second in the Central Division, and that takes us to the Southeast. The Southeast Division consisting of the Heat, the Hawks, the Wizards, the Magic, and the Hornets. Let's just get this out of the way. There's no sugarcoating this. This division is unbelievably weak. This is a very bad division. Only one team last season, and that is Miami, finished above 500. The Hawks were exactly 500, so technically speaking, they weren't under, but they weren't over either. But this is not the greatest division, and it hasn't been in a little while, so the winner is pretty damn easy to predict here. It's probably going to be the Heat again. The Wizards, the Magic, and the Hornets might find ways to improve this season, but not even remotely close to what they would need to win the division, especially with a Miami squad that's looking to build off of a finals appearance here, right? For the Heat, yes, they lost some important pieces around the edges, right? Max Strus went to Cleveland, Gabe Vincent went to the Lakers, but at the end of the day, they're built around a sort of core duo here. They've got Bam Adebayo still, they've got Jimmy Butler still. Those two serve as sort of the tent poles that the rest of the Heat can sort of rally around, and they do have some other pieces that they're excited about. Some young guys who are going to have to prove themselves for sure, but the Heat have to feel relatively confident, especially in this division, and especially if they do somehow finally complete a Damian Lillard trade. If they complete the trade, they get Lillard. If they don't complete that trade, you're still looking at Tyler Hero, who is seeing his value fluctuate depending on who you're talking to in terms of how good he is. But if you look at his numbers from the last 2-3 seasons, I mean, he's averaging close to or above 20 points per game. His efficiency is pretty good, relatively good. I mean, it can always be better, but I don't know. He's not just filler in this trade. He is a pretty important piece for the Heat, whether they keep him or they use him to facilitate the trade. But regardless of what happens, I don't really see too many teams getting past the Heat in this division. So still picking them as the winner. In terms of the runner-up here, we're going to go with the Atlanta Hawks. I'm going to be perfectly honest here. I did not like what I saw from the Hawks for most of last season, and they largely didn't change much in this last off season, but the division is pretty bad. Realistically speaking, though, the Hawks need the duo of Trae Young and DeJounte Murray to simply explode this year and basically force the team to improve by sheer force of will, with assistance from some of these other pieces, right? Young and Murray will not literally do this by themselves. Guys like Clint Capella, guys like Bogdanovich, guys like DeAndre Hunter, they need to step up and they need to play consistently. You can't be guaranteed that that's going to happen for Atlanta, but I see that sort of scenario to be far more likely than the scenario in which any other team suddenly improves, right? Where the Wizards immediately figure it out, where Paolo Banchero just suddenly becomes an MVP candidate and the Magic just improve overnight. It seems far more likely for the Hawks to figure things out and take that runner-up spot compared to any of the other teams remaining. So it's not the greatest vote of confidence for Atlanta, but the other teams in the division are even worse. So the Hawks as the runner-up here in the Southeast, the Heat as the winner, and we move along to the Western Conference, starting with the Pacific Division. And the Pacific includes the Lakers, the Clippers, the Suns, the Warriors, and the Kings. So, in terms of the division winner here, I am going to go with the Phoenix Suns. The idea here is that the Suns simply overwhelm their opponents with firepower in the form of those main four stars, right? Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, DeAndre Ayton will just have so much star power that they are going to run teams over. And they're going to need to, because the bench is unlikely to do really any sort of heavy lifting here. Their job is just to kind of get the stars rest and to not mess things up. But that's precisely the point. This team has been built where the depth is there, but it doesn't need to match up to the output of the stars. They just need to be able to hold the line, put in good effort defensively, wait for the reinforcements to come back in the form of those star players, and see where they go from there. Right? For the Suns, you know, it's a cherry on top. It's bonus points here if they somehow convince one of those stars to maybe mix things up a little bit and actually even play with the second unit, just so that it's not quite as clear-cut. Here's the stars, okay, now here's the second unit, and the second unit's just infinitely worse. If one of KD or Booker or Beal or Ayton is willing to maybe stagger their minutes a little bit to play with some of the second string lineups, then a lot of the quote-unquote weakness of the Suns roster gets taken away, and you present matchup issues that your opponents may have problems with. I don't know if any of those four guys are going to be willing to sort of change like that. I mean, obviously they wouldn't give up their starting positions, but I don't know if they'd be willing to sort of change the rotations in that manner. But either way, the Suns just have way too much talent up front there to not sort of be at the top of the list in the Pacific. In terms of the runner-up, though, I am going to go with the Los Angeles Lakers. I was tempted to put the Clippers in this spot, but the Clippers need both Kawhi Leonard and Paul George to be healthy for a whole season, and we haven't really seen that happen to any point since they signed in LA, so I'm kind of hard-pressed to assume that's going to happen, so we go with the Lakers. Yes, it is true. The team finished at the bottom of the division last year. They were last in the Pacific Division, but I mean, people have said it to the point where you're probably just sick of hearing it, but phrases along the lines of the team having basically different rosters in the first half versus the second half, or having revamped or remade their entire lineup, those really aren't exaggerations. If you look at just how much changed around the Lakers at last season's trade deadline. And the newer version, the team that came out post-trade deadline, was one of the best teams in the West and in the league record-wise in the second half of the season, right? I mean, they made it to the Western Conference Finals, and now in this offseason, steps have been taken that, at least on paper, make the team better. So long as those moves do pan out, players don't suddenly forget how to play basketball, and LeBron and Anthony Davis are both healthy and at the helm for this team, the Lakers seem much more likely to look like the team that made that Western Conference Finals appearance compared to the one that limped into the All-Star break last season. So, is it enough to beat the star-studded Suns lineup? Not so sure, but runner-up in the division is definitely something that I could see happening pretty easily here. But we move things along to the Northwest Division. This division consists of the Nuggets, the Trailblazers, the Thunder, the Timberwolves, and the Jazz. So, in terms of the winner, this is easy. This is the Denver Nuggets. No one else in the division comes even remotely close to the defending champions here. The core is still intact. Some pieces have been lost in terms of their depth. That is true. That is something that the Nuggets will have to contend with. Some of their younger guys are going to have to be ready to go maybe a little bit earlier than anticipated, but you still got, you have an incredibly talented starting lineup who's going to be able to buy the time needed to see which pieces from the bench are the ones that the Nuggets are going to be able to rely on down the stretch. So really, the only thing that derails the Nuggets is injury or ego at this point. But the real sort of interesting question in the Northwest Division is who takes that runner-up spot. I am going with the Oklahoma City Thunder here. There is an argument to be made for the Minnesota Timberwolves that would make just as much sense to me, but I'm going to go with OKC on this one. Last season saw the Thunder and really the rest of the league as well realize that this team is not as far away from playoff contention as some may have initially thought. Going into the season, there were people, sort of thinking about whether the team might just want to try and maybe not tank outright, but at least not maybe put in 100% effort and see what they can get draft-wise. But the team had more in the tank than I think even they anticipated. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander emerged as a star option. Some of the team's young players have developed really nicely in a short amount of time, right? You still got guys like Josh Giddey coming up, so all of their guys are relatively young and have room to improve. Now you've got Chet Holmgren, presumably healthy and ready to go for his first actual real season of playing in the NBA, and I think the Thunder stand to improve pretty significantly over last season, and last season nearly saw them make the playoffs. So, they will almost certainly have an issue competing with the Timberwolves. As I said, you could put Minnesota in this slot, and it would make all sorts of sense. But for now, I'm cautiously optimistic that the Thunder's improvement will be better. And realistically speaking, that's a coin flip. But I think the Thunder's improvement, or how should I say this? The Timberwolves had more of their key guys for longer stretches of the season than the Thunder and only barely finished in front of them. So I think the Thunder healthy has more improvement over last season compared to the Timberwolves being healthy, if that makes any sense. It's still going to be close, but I had to pick one, so we did. But that moves us to the final division here, the Southwest Division. That division consists of the Grizzlies, the Pelicans, the Rockets, the Mavericks, and the Spurs. So, in terms of a division winner here, I am going to go with New Orleans, with the Pelicans. Now, the Grizzlies pretty handily won this division last season. That is true. But now the team has to deal with the 25-game suspension to Ja Morant, and while they are built to withstand that, especially with Marcus Smart now coming over, there's a difference between withstanding a 25-game suspension and thriving during that span, right? I think Ja being out for 25 creates a potential opening for someone like the Pelicans to take the division. It's worth reminding people, because a lot of people have seemed to forgotten, that there was a time last season when a healthy Pelican squad, and by healthy I mostly mean Zion Williamson, but a healthy Pelican squad was in first place in the entire Western Conference, not just the Southwest Division. So we know what the team is capable of when they are at 100%, and Zion is, I was going to say presumably, but I think that's even a little bit too much, hopefully going to be healthy and ready to play, and the rest of the team is there and healthy as well, right? McCollum, Ingram, Valanciunas are good to go. Now, you do have some concerns around the edges, right? Specifically, recently Trey Murphy got hurt, so there are some injury concerns in terms of their depth, but Zion coming back and being healthy sort of just covers up a lot of those concerns, and between a healthy Zion and a 25-game suspension for Ja, I think the Pelicans could swing the division their way. Of course, I picked the Pelicans as the winner, and I say they might be able to take the division from the Grizzlies. That means that our runner-up is very clearly that Grizzlies squad, right? While the suspension to Ja Morant may cause the team to slip enough for the Pelicans to come in and steal the division, I don't expect the slip-up here for Memphis to be enough for the squad to fall any lower than second place in this division, right? Especially considering who else is in there. The Rockets, the Mavs, and the Spurs. The Rockets and the Spurs are not going to be ready to compete that early unless something incredible happens with one of those two squads. So the Grizzlies really only have to worry about holding off the Mavericks here if they can't just sort of win the division outright. Ja Morant, as I said, won't be there for 25 games, but guys like Desmond Bane and the recently acquired Marcus Smart are in a perfect position to collectively kind of make up for the loss of Morant. And then down low, you've still got some pretty solid stuff going for you. Steven Adams will hopefully be back and healthy. Jaren Jackson Jr. maybe didn't have the greatest of times at the World Cup in terms of his production and his play, but coming back to the NBA game should still be just as sort of strong and reliable as he was last season. So they should still be able to hold things down, be one of the maybe better defensive teams. Better defensive teams in the league, with Steven Adams and Jaren Jackson Jr. sort of anchoring their defensive efforts, and guys like Marcus Smart thrown in as well. So I would still be wary of a surge from a team like Dallas, right? If the Mavs figure out how this whole Kyrie-Luka duo is going to work out for them. But I still pretty much have faith in the Grizzlies, with or without Ja, to be able to hold the line. But that is it. That is what we've got here. So, as a recap, I'll just throw it up on the screen real quick. For the Atlantic Division, we got the Celtics as the winners, the Knicks as the runner-up. In the Central Division, it's the Bucks in first, the Cavs in second. Over in the Southeast Division, the Heat in first, the Hawks in second. And then in terms of our Western Conference divisions, the Suns at the top of the Pacific Division, the Lakers as the runner-up. In the Northwest, it's the Nuggets in first and the Thunder in second. And then obviously, we just talked about with the Southwest, Pelicans first, Grizzlies in second place. So there you go. Those are my predictions for the top two in each division. Honestly, for a lot of these divisions, it looks pretty similar to last season, and that's because we didn't have too many seismic shifts here in terms of players going to different locations. So it may look relatively similar to the last campaign. But let me know what you think. Which of these do you think are right or wrong? I do admit, especially in the sort of runner-up sections for a lot of these divisions, I did maybe go out on a limb for some of these, right? The Knicks in the Atlantic in particular, the Thunder for sure in the Northwest Division were ones where I could absolutely see arguments being made for other teams that would make just as much sense. But let me know what you think here. But other than that, thank you all so much for watching, and I will talk to you later.